Thomas Mitchell had built his life on cold practicality, his heart locked away since tragedy struck his Montana ranch 3 winters past. When drought threatened everything, he wrote to a matrimonial agency requesting not beauty or romance, but simply a sturdy woman who could help save his failing ranch. What Thomas never expected was that sometimes fate sends exactly what you don't want, but precisely what your soul needs. This is the story of a man who thought he'd ordered a business partner, but instead received a gift that would awaken his buried and cold heart forever. Chapter 1. The Practical Man's Desperate Plan. The merciless Montana sun blazed overhead like a copper furnace, turning Thomas Mitchell's once green pastures into a barren wasteland of cracked earth and dying grass. He stood on the sagging porch of his weathered ranch house, surveying the devastation that drought had brought to his land. The cattle, what remained of his once proud herd, clustered around the rapidly shrinking waterhole, their ribs showing through dull hides. Thomas was a man carved from the same unforgiving stone as the Montana mountains themselves. At 32, his face bore the weathered lines of a life lived entirely outdoors, his steel-gray eyes holding no self-pity, only grim determination. 3 years earlier, consumption had taken his beloved wife Sarah, leaving him alone with memories that cut deeper than any winter wind. He had buried his heart alongside her, vowing never again to expose himself to such devastating loss. The endless drought had stretched through 2 brutal seasons, draining his savings and driving away the seasonal hands. The bank held mortgages that demanded payment regardless of rainfall, and creditors circled like vultures, sensing imminent death. Thomas calculated his options with methodical precision, and the mathematics were merciless. Without help, he would lose everything within months. The solution came to him during one sleepless night, as practical as it was distasteful. He needed a partner to share the backbreaking work and help stretch his dwindling resources. Marriage, viewed through necessity rather than romance, made perfect sense. A wife could cook, clean, tend the garden, and help with ranch duties. In return, she would have shelter and protection from the harsh realities facing unmarried women in the wilderness. Thomas spent 3 careful days composing his letter to the matrimonial agency in Helena. His words were deliberately plain, devoid of flowery language. He sought a woman of mature years and solid character, someone who understood frontier hardships. Beauty, he specified, was unnecessary and potentially troublesome. He wanted no delicate flower who might stir dangerous emotions. What he needed was a practical partner who could work alongside him without complicating his carefully ordered existence. When he sealed the envelope and rode to Copper Falls to mail it, Thomas felt the grim satisfaction of a man who had made a necessary decision. He had no illusions about love or happiness. All he wanted was survival, and he was prepared to pay whatever price was demanded. Chapter 2. When Beauty Defied All Expectations. 6 weeks later, the telegram arrived like a bolt from clear skies. Thomas read the brief message 3 times before its meaning penetrated his consciousness. Bride arriving on Thursday afternoon train. Victoria Sterling. Prepare accommodations. Thursday was tomorrow, and suddenly his abstract arrangement crystallized into terrifying reality. The morning dawned crisp and clear, autumn painting the Montana landscape in shades of gold and crimson. He hitched his best horses to the wagon, their breath forming small clouds in the cool air. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the harness, a tremor he attributed to morning chill rather than nerves. After all, this was merely a business transaction. Copper Falls buzzed with unusual activity for Thursday afternoon. Word traveled faster than wildfire in small frontier towns, and by the time Thomas drove down Main Street, curious faces peered from every window. The station master greeted him with a knowing grin that made Thomas's jaw clench with irritation. Even the saloon girls had emerged to witness the spectacle of the hermit rancher collecting his bride. The train's whistle echoed across the valley long before the locomotive appeared, a mournful sound carrying portents of change. Thomas stood rigid on the platform, his hat pulled low, trying to ignore the growing crowd that had gathered like spectators at a county fair. He had prepared himself for awkwardness, for integrating a stranger into his solitary existence. But nothing could have prepared him for what stepped off that train. Victoria Sterling descended from the passenger car with fluid grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics governing ordinary mortals. Her traveling dress, though modestly cut, could not disguise the elegant curves beneath, and her auburn hair caught the afternoon sunlight like burnished copper. But it was her face that struck Thomas like a physical blow. Delicate features that belonged in a Renaissance painting, skin like porcelain, and eyes the color of emeralds that seemed to hold secrets deeper than mountain lakes. The platform fell silent except for the hiss of steam from the cooling locomotive. Every person present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. Victoria's gaze swept the crowd with calm confidence before settling on Thomas. And in that instant, he felt his carefully constructed defenses crumble like ancient walls facing cannon fire. This was not the sturdy, unremarkable woman he had requested. This was a vision of feminine perfection that would haunt men's dreams and inspire poets. And she was here for him, bound by contract to become his wife. Thomas felt panic grip his heart as he realized his greatest fear had materialized. He had not merely acquired help for his ranch. He had invited temptation itself into his carefully guarded world. Chapter 3. Living with Temptation Under One Roof. The wagon ride to the ranch stretched like an eternity across the rolling Montana hills. Thomas kept his eyes fixed firmly on the dusty trail ahead, acutely aware of Victoria sitting beside him with perfect posture, her hands folded demurely in her lap. The silence between them felt charged with unspoken questions and dangerous possibilities. Every time the wagon hit a rut, their shoulders brushed briefly, sending electric shocks through his nervous system. Victoria spoke only once during the journey, commenting on the stark beauty of the landscape with a voice like honey poured over velvet. Thomas managed a grunt in response, not trusting himself to engage in actual conversation. He had prepared for practical discussions about household duties and work schedules, not for the melodic tones of a woman whose very presence seemed to fill the air with invisible fire. When they reached the ranch, Thomas helped her down from the wagon with hands that trembled despite his iron will. The brief contact of her gloved fingers against his palm sent heat racing up his arm, and he released her as quickly as propriety allowed. He carried her modest trunk to the small room he had prepared, the same space where Sarah had once sewn quilts and hummed lullabies to children who never came. Victoria surveyed her new quarters with calm acceptance, running her fingertips along the windowsill where dust motes danced in the afternoon light. She asked practical questions about meals, washing facilities, and household routines, displaying none of the feminine hysteria Thomas had secretly feared. Her composure impressed him even as it unnerved him. This was clearly a woman accustomed to adapting to difficult circumstances. That first evening proved a trial by fire for Thomas's resolve. Victoria moved through his kitchen with surprising efficiency, transforming simple ingredients into a meal that rivaled anything he remembered from his mother's table. The domestic sounds of cooking filled spaces that had known only masculine silence for 3 years, and the aroma of fresh bread made the crude ranch house feel almost like a home again. They ate in careful silence, the lamplight casting golden shadows across Victoria's features and turning her auburn hair into burnished flame. Thomas forced himself to focus on his plate, but his peripheral vision betrayed him repeatedly. Every graceful gesture, every delicate movement of her hands, every soft breath she drew seemed magnified in the intimate confines of his kitchen. After supper, Thomas retreated to his study under the pretense of reviewing ranch accounts, but the numbers blurred before his eyes as his thoughts spiraled in dangerous directions. Through the thin walls, he could hear Victoria moving about her room, the whisper of fabric and the soft sounds of a woman preparing for sleep. His imagination, dormant for 3 years, suddenly blazed to life with visions he had no right to entertain. This arrangement would test every ounce of his legendary self-control. He had invited a goddess into his world of dust and solitude, and already the foundations of his carefully constructed emotional fortress were showing alarming cracks. Chapter 4. Strength Revealed in Crisis. October arrived with a vengeance, bringing the kind of early blizzard that old-timers spoke of in hushed tones. Thomas woke to howling wind and the ominous silence that comes when snow falls so thick it muffles all sound. Through his frost-covered window, he could see nothing but swirling white chaos. The thermometer read 20 degrees below zero, and the storm showed no signs of abating. Victoria appeared in the kitchen before dawn, already dressed and moving with purposeful efficiency. She had somehow coaxed life from the temperamental stove and had coffee brewing in the battered pot that Thomas had been fighting with for months. Her hair was braided back practically, and she wore one of Sarah's old work dresses that Thomas had wordlessly left outside her door the previous evening. The blizzard raged for 3 days, turning the ranch house into an island in an ocean of white. When the wind finally died on the 4th morning, Thomas ventured out to check on his cattle. What he found made his blood run cold. Wolf tracks circled the huddled herd like signatures of death, and 3 calves lay motionless in the snow, their bodies torn and bloodied by predators that had used the storm as cover. That evening, as Thomas sat cleaning his rifle by lamplight, Victoria emerged from her room carrying a Winchester that looked impossibly elegant in her delicate hands. Her green eyes held steady resolve as she met his startled gaze. She explained that her father had believed every woman should know how to protect herself, and that she could shoot and watch for wolves as well as any man. When the wolf pack returned the following night, their howls cutting through the frozen air like knives, Victoria took her position on the front porch without complaint. She sat motionless in the bitter cold, wrapped in blankets, but alert as a sentinel, her rifle ready across her knees. When the wolves finally emerged from the tree-line, ghostly shadows against the snow, Victoria's shot rang out clear and true. The pack leader dropped instantly, and her second shot scattered the others back into the darkness. Thomas, rushing from the barn where he had been guarding the cattle, found her still seated calmly on the porch, smoke rising from her Winchester's barrel. In that moment, watching this beautiful woman who had proven herself as capable and courageous as any frontier wife, Thomas felt something dangerous stir in his chest. This was not the helpless ornament he had feared. This was a partner worthy of respect, a woman who could stand beside him against whatever hardships the wilderness might bring. And that realization terrified him more than any pack of wolves ever could. Chapter 5. When the Past Comes Calling. Spring arrived late that year, bringing not only melting snow and budding hope, but also an unwelcome visitor who would shatter the fragile peace Thomas and Victoria had built together. The stranger rode up on a magnificent black stallion, his expensive Eastern clothes and polished boots marking him as distinctly out of place in the rugged Montana landscape. His cold blue eyes swept over the property with calculating precision, taking inventory like a man appraising merchandise. Thomas emerged from the barn, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun at his hip as he studied this unwelcome intruder. There was something predatory about the man's bearing, a barely concealed arrogance that set Thomas's teeth on edge. When a stranger's gaze shifted toward the house, where Victoria had appeared in the doorway, Thomas saw her face drain of all color, her composure cracking for the first time since her arrival. The man introduced himself as Marcus Blackwood, his cultured voice carrying an undertone of menace that made Thomas's blood run cold. He spoke to Victoria with mocking familiarity, asking if she really thought she could hide from him in this godforsaken wilderness. Victoria's hands trembled as she gripped the doorframe, her emerald eyes wide with unmistakable terror. This woman who had faced down wolves without flinching now appeared fragile as spun glass, as if Blackwood's very presence might shatter her completely. Blackwood laughed with genuine amusement, the sound as chilling as winter ice cracking on a frozen lake. He produced a leather portfolio from his coat, withdrawing documents that rustled ominously in the morning air. He revealed that Victoria's father had been a compulsive gambler who had wagered away not only his fortune, but his daughter's freedom as well. $20,000 in debt, with interest compounding daily. Victoria belonged to him, body and soul, until every penny was repaid. The truth emerged in fragments, each revelation more damning than the last. When consumption claimed Victoria's father, she had fled west rather than become Blackwood's possession, but legal documents backed his claim with ironclad authority. Thomas felt rage building in his chest like a gathering storm. This refined predator had come to steal away the woman who had brought life back to his barren world, treating her like property to be collected. The business arrangement he had entered into with Victoria suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the protective instincts that roared to life within him. Thomas declared that Victoria was his wife now, making any previous claim void. Blackwood's laughter echoed across the ranch yard like the cry of a carrion bird. He saw no ring, no certificate, no legal binding. Just two people playing house in the wilderness. As Blackwood prepared to leave, promising to return with legal authority to claim his prize, Thomas made a decision that would change everything. He would not lose Victoria to this devil in a gentleman's clothing, no matter what the cost. Some battles were worth fighting, regardless of the odds, and some things were worth dying for. Chapter 6. Love Conquers All Fears. Blackwood returned 3 days later with the territorial marshal and a court order that made his claim legally binding. The entire population of Copper Falls had gathered to witness the spectacle, drawn by gossip that spread faster than prairie fire. Thomas stood on his porch, his hand resting on his Colt revolver, while Victoria remained inside, her fate hanging in the balance. Thomas announced he would pay the debt, asking Blackwood to name his price. The Eastern gentleman's smile was as cold as winter moonlight. $30,000, with accumulated interest, more than any rancher could raise in a lifetime. The crowd murmured at the impossible sum, recognizing it as a death sentence for any honest man's finances. Thomas felt the weight of every eye upon him as he made his choice. They would settle it the old way. He and Blackwood, winner takes all. If Thomas won, Victoria's debt would be cleared, and Blackwood would leave Montana forever. If Blackwood won, he could have everything Thomas owned, including Victoria's contract. The duel was set for dawn the following morning. That night, Thomas sat with Victoria by the fireplace, finally speaking the words he had kept locked in his heart for months. He told her he loved her, not as a business arrangement or convenient partnership, but as a man loves the woman he cannot live without. Victoria's tears caught the firelight like diamonds as she whispered her own confession. She had come running from one prison, only to discover she had found her home. She loved Thomas Mitchell with everything she was. Dawn broke clear and cold over the main street of Copper Falls. Thomas and Blackwood faced each other across 20 paces of packed dirt, their shadows long in the morning light. The marshal counted down from 10, his voice echoing off the false-fronted buildings. Blackwood was fast, his hand moving like striking lightning toward his pearl-handled pistol. But Thomas was steady, drawing with deliberate precision and firing a single shot that dropped his opponent before Blackwood's weapon cleared leather. The Eastern gentleman fell into the dust, clutching his wounded shoulder, his arrogance finally shattered. Thomas declared it was over. Victoria was free. Within the hour, Thomas and Victoria stood before the circuit judge, speaking vows that transformed their practical arrangement into something sacred and eternal. As they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, the crowd cheered, and even the cynical residents of Copper Falls found themselves believing in the power of love to conquer impossible odds. Years later, as Thomas watched Victoria playing with their children in the garden she had coaxed from the stubborn Montana soil, he reflected on the mysterious ways fate works its will. He had ordered a plain woman to help save his ranch, but instead received a beautiful angel who had saved his soul. Sometimes the universe knows exactly what we need, even when we are too stubborn or frightened to ask for it ourselves. If this tale of unexpected love on the frontier captured your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible Western romance stories. Love can bloom in the most unlikely places, And we have many more tales of passion and adventure waiting for you. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform even the most guarded hearts.